Thanks to all my viewers. Welcome to my YouTube channel and feel at home. It is my hope that you will enjoy and maybe learn from my analysis of global politics and my recommendations and conclusion that I will make ultimately. Today I'm going to share my ideas concerning the ongoing civil war in Syria and the future of such civil wars in the contemporary world today. First, to begin with, I would like to say that most states, if not all, are part of the United Nations organization, whether they are entities like Malta, whether they are members with observer status like Holy See and Palestine, or whether generally they are just states with full recognition of their sovereignty by the international law. If you take a closer look at the United Nations Charter, specifically the preamble, it begins with, and I quote, "We the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, which twice in our lifetime has brought untold sorrow to mankind." I would like to pause there, meaning that the United Nations organization is strongly mandated to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Since its formation in 1945, the United Nations organization has grown wider in its mandate beyond just peace and security. And one of the greatest challenges that has affected the United Nations today has been the division among the Security Council members. You will agree with me that the current structure of the United Nations Security Council is based on the geopolitical realities of 1945. And you must accept the fact that the world has changed considerably. Equally, the UN must reform itself. Since the major power status is in a continuous state of flux, some states have risen to the status of a major power, and they demand a seat at the P5s in the Security Council. We must add more members to the permanent seat so that the organization can be more democratic, more representative, and gain greater legitimacy. One may ask me, why am I talking about the United Nations instead of just delving directly into the topic? Well, it has everything to do with the Syrian conflict. When I'm talking about the United Nations organization, I'm not only talking about the organizational structure, I'm also talking about how world governments confront common challenges and achieve similar objectives and purpose. Well, coming back to the main topic, I think the Syrian conflict is a conflict which is quite indispensable and should be undertaken with painstaking excellence and the seriousness it deserves. This conflict began as a political movement in 2011 as a revolt against President Bashir al-Assad, and all along the way it has escalated into one of the worst humanitarian crises in the 21st century today. Numerous efforts have been made to try to curb the conflict, but all have proved futile simply because of a number of reasons. Number one, because of the divisions of the Security Council of the United Nations, where the Russians and the Chinese are on one side, and the USA, Britain, and France are equally on the other side, making it difficult to make a consensus decision or resolution that can be built upon to implement the possible course of action. Other reasons include that the protagonists on the Syrian soil are determined to fight the war with every fiber in their bodies. The supporters are willing to supply them with weapons, and all these have been detrimental to the peace process in Syria. I personally believe that we cannot solve the situation in Syria with the military mind alone. We need to deploy all kinds of pressures, including diplomatic pressure, political and economic pressure as well. Often when we hear about the conflict in Syria, we have always focused on the Sunni Shias rivalry, and that's where we have gone wrong. There are various interest groups in Syria, including the Kurds, the Turkmen, the Christian, the Druze, and others, and all these interest groups are caught up in the middle. What happens to them when you only focus on the Syrian government and the opposition alone? All warring parties must come to the table for a peaceful discussion, for political settlement, and ultimately coming up with a ceasefire. All these groups must be assured of a future in Syria. All these groups must be assured of a political dispensation that will cater for the interests of them all in Syria. And if a coalition government is formed, then this transition government must have full executive authority and have all the reinforcement required so as to avoid future crises, to avoid future tensions and breaching of the ceasefire. I'm worried about the conflict in Syria. Number one, because even if it takes 10 or 20 years, all these parties to the conflict will have to come to the table and have a political settlement that will ultimately bring peace in Syria. The only problem is that as time elapsed by, as years elapsed by, more harm and damage would have been done to the Syrians. More Syrians would have died, and it will ultimately hurt the economy of Syria. Another reason why I'm concerned about the conflict in Syria is that if we are not careful about the Syrian conflict, it will bubble up and inflame the whole Middle East region and have spillover effects to other parts of the world. It will affect Latin America, it will affect Africa, and specifically the north of Africa. And you can bear with me witness that the north of Africa suffered the fate of the Arab Spring in 2011. In my closing remarks, I would like to say that I am a guy who believes in change, that change is possible, even the most basic, radical, fundamental change is possible. Since we are living in a redefined world today, I think it is imperative that the international community takes full responsibility of ensuring that there is international peace and security. That any intervention made should not be based on selfish interest, but rather should be based on equality, should be based on the goodwill, voluntarily, passion-driven, and with protocol. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.